For this part of the class, we want to set up and configure our Stripe payment gateway. So I sent out an announcement last night. I sent you a link. You can find that on Blackboard. If you haven't already registered, if you can please follow that link and go and create a free account for yourself. Doesn't take long. I believe it will send you an email with a confirmation link you need to click. So the link I sent you was to dashboard.stripe.com/register. So Stripe is not the only payment service out there. There are dozens and dozens of different payment gateways. They all work in a similar kind of way. And most of them give us a testing sandbox so that we can send payments through without having to provide real credit card numbers and charges. If you use a shopping cart, pre-existing shopping cart software, like in the PHP world, you use a popular cart like Magento, or if you go and sign up for a service like Shopify, those services already are integrated with dozens of gateways. All you basically have to do is create an account and provide the API keys and they work. You don't really have to write any code. They're already hooked up. We're custom building our own carts, so we've got to write the code ourselves to integrate with the gateway. So I've already created my account. We can see what's in the payment dashboard. We're really only interested in a couple things here. There's lots here.
Does it handle all the visual invoicing like that on their side, or do you have to put it there?
No, we're going to create our own invoice afterwards, but that's going to be easy. We can actually scaffold that because we have an orders and an order details table we're going to save our order to and all the items, and then we can scaffold an orders controller that has an index page, so that can be like our order history, and then it's already got the details link. You click it, and then we get the order details. So that in effect is our invoice page. So this will track, this will show you like all the transactions, all kinds of analytics and things in here. We're not, and this, but it defaults to viewing test data. So you have to activate your account before you can send real payments through.
What am I looking at? Like, it says you have some money coming in and out. Do you use this for like your clients?
No, this is all test data. This is all stuff I've done in class when I've sent through test payments. So these are all, this is all testing. So in the last week, I did an order in my other class on Friday for $548. So there's my weekly sales volume. Here's my year to date. So it won't be live, so we can put through any payments we want. One thing that's a good idea, so we typically want to set up a gateway in testing mode. Eventually we have to turn it live. So what we want to typically do once we make it live is you generally want to create a product or service in your store that costs 1 cent. So you can put through actual transactions that get charged to a credit card, but you're not paying a whole bunch of money and you have to deal with refunds. So make a hidden product somewhere worth 1 cent and you can test your purchases that way. So the primary thing we're interested in is in the settings. Once we set this up, actually, sorry, it's not under settings. It's under developers. So you should be getting pretty familiar with what we need when we call an API. We've got under developers and API keys. We're going to have two keys, basically a public and a private key. So we're going to need to add these to our application code. When you call Stripe, they're not going to let you call the API if you don't provide the keys. If you don't have an account, they're just going to send back an unauthorized. I don't know, to be honest with you. So again, notice it says we're viewing test keys. We would have to activate to toggle. So our key, notice it has the word test in it. So once we go live, the word test is not going to be here in our public and private keys. So first thing we need to do is we need to add, there is a package for Stripe, a NuGet package that contains all the libraries used to send payments. So I'm going to click on my Tools menu and go to the NuGet Package Manager, and I want to manage the NuGet packages for my solution. So I'll just leave the menu up here for a minute. Or you can right-click the project and choose Manage NuGet Packages. We want to manage the packages for the solution. Which will open the NuGet window. And make sure you click on this first tab that says Browse. This allows us to search the NuGet repository online for new packages. All right, there it is. So Newtonsoft was by James Newton King. It's done pretty well with it, 320 million downloads of his library. So in here, we want to search for Stripe. So there are a few different packages. This is the official library that Stripe developed and published to the store. There are also some other libraries for Stripe developed by third-party users. So for example, if we're building an iOS app in Visual Studio, there's a Stripe package so that we can make Stripe payments on an iPhone or iPad. We just want this one for 3 million downloads. So I'm going to click stripe.net and check my project here. The latest version is 33.3. Just published, just updated a couple weeks ago. So check your project and then the install button should be enabled. So we'll install this. So step 1, register for Stripe. Step 2, install the package. So now Stripe shows up in my project under dependencies in NuGet. Here's Stripe. And we can see the dependencies that Stripe has. It also uses Newtonsoft because it's calling an API, so it needs to be able to read and write JSON to do this. It's got its core DLL, excuse me, as well as it has a configuration for encrypting as well as managing permissions. So all those things are bundled underneath that one package. So our next step is to add our keys. So I'm going to open up my app settings.json. We've already got a Google section here. I'm going to add comma at the end, and I'm going to add a section for our Stripe API keys. So Google calls its keys client ID and client secret. Stripe calls its keys publishable key and secret key. And these are just variable names, really, so it doesn't really matter what I call them. And then just like we did with our Google API, I need to go back to the Stripe dashboard and copy the publishable and secret keys in here. So I'll go back. Okay, well, I'll copy my, I don't know, it's my machine that's really slow. The internet seems really slow. Okay. Actually, I better copy this while I can see it. I'll grab the secret key and insert it. I'll grab my publishable key. So the publishable key is going to go in our payment form. It'll be a hidden field, but it's publishable. It's okay if a user views the source and sees this value. The secret key we use to process the payment in our C# code. So this one can be visible by end users, not this one. Kind of the same with our Google logging API. Users may be able to see this value, but they're never going to see the secret. Okay? So that's what's new here. So we need these values to be accessible in our controller. In our payment page, we're going to need to call Stripe from here. We need those keys. There's a bit of a trick for doing this. Our Google IDs, we use those here in our startup file. We set up two variables. We got the Google section, we read those, and we added them to our services. So the startup file, it can read these values. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a pain. Our controllers can't actually read our app settings file directly. The startup file can get to it, but these files can't. So what we need to do, because our startup file has access to our app settings.json, we've got to make a few changes here to read the values, read the Stripe values here, and then we need to pass them to our shop controller. So our controller has access to those keys. A little bit complicated. So how do we do this? So in my startup file, we want to make configuration values app settings.json available to the controllers. So I'm going to add a new line into my startup file in the configure method, where we've already configured identity, we've configured Google, and we've configured session support. So we've made lots of changes to this method already. We're going to make another one. We're going to call a built-in method here called add singleton. I'll explain what this does. And we're going to pass in an instance of our configuration. The configuration class is the object that can read settings from app settings.json. So if we do this, we're basically giving all our controllers access to the site configuration. Without this, those controllers, we can't read those keys. It represents a set of key value application properties. So things like our Stripe publishable key and Stripe secret key. So we need this one line here. And then we're going to have to also change our shop controller. Our other controllers don't really need this, but our shop controller does. So in my shop controller, I'm going to scroll up to the top. Special. Private. I'll explain what's going on here. So this line is using our database. We also want this controller to use our site configuration. I put this line in here, it gives me an error, doesn't know what my configuration is. So our controller, we need this reference. If we're going to read anything from the app settings file, we need to reference Microsoft.extensions.configuration. So I'll accept this reference. So it adds a reference on line 10. So I've added line 10 and line 20 so far. We now need to change line 23. So what this is doing so far, so here's a question for those of you who have taken Java before and are in computer programmer. What is this method from line 23 to 27? What's happening here? You've done this in Java a million times if you're in semester 3. Joel?
I get the setting it's taking context and setting it to.
Okay, right, yes, that's true. Yeah, it's connecting the database. Dustin? Right. Okay. This is using a technique called now there won't be a quiz section on the final exam, but if there was, this would be the first question on it. What is dependency injection? So what this means, as Dustin said, is every time we want to use the shop controller gets something passed into it. What kind of object is being passed in here? Stephen, you mentioned it. Right. Every time you create the controller, we need to pass it a database connection. So this technique where we pass one object to another object is called dependency injection. It's different from what we're doing down here, right? Here, we're just passing a string. It's not an object. We're passing a value to a method. In this case, we're passing one object to another, and then this object uses this database connection. So dependency injection, we actually use it a lot in the JavaScript world. And the idea is that one object's behavior depends on what kind of object gets passed to it. So to give you an example from, we talked about in my class the other day. If I say to Patricia, if I give Patricia a hammer and I say, go to work, what are you going to do with the hammer? Yeah, you'll bang something, right? If I give you a saw and say, go to work, what are you going to do with the saw? Are you going to hammer? What will you do instead? Yeah, you'll cut. So in that case, might be one method called work, but that method takes different objects. And what that work method does will depend what kind of object gets passed in. So, right, so we're setting it, this indicates, this is just convention. I don't need to use the underscore, but the convention is in .NET, when we have variables that represent objects that are injected using this technique, we typically prefix those objects with underscores. Right. That means it represents an object that is injected in. Right. So this was here, and the scaffolding does this automatically. So like our controller, our product controller, we didn't make any changes here. We just scaffolded this And notice when we scaffold it, here's the first few lines of the controller. Declare an instance of the database context and use dependency injection. Whenever you create the product controller, it accepts a database object. So all our controllers automatically accept the database, but our shop controller also needs a configuration object. So in here,
Yes.
Is that have to be created after you create the session variable, or is the order important?
I don't think the order is important.
I didn't know if it's past the session.
No, I don't think that's important. So we need this line and we need to rewrite this method. So this will then allow us access to the Stripe keys that we put, or anything else we put in app settings.json. If we don't do this and we try to reference those keys, it's going to say, we don't know what the configuration is. It's hidden. So we're using this technique to pass our site configuration to the controller. If we don't need to read values from app settings.json in a controller, we don't need to do this. Our categories controller doesn't need it. Our products controller doesn't need it. This is the only file, only controller lot where we have logic that's trying to access our app settings.json. So I'll just build and make sure things compile. So we added our keys to app settings.json. We enabled the configuration in startup with this line that's highlighted. And then we made those changes in our shop controller. This is all just part of our setup. Now we should be able to actually use the stuff we've set up. We won't see any changes in the website as it is. There's nothing visible so far based on what we've changed. So I added line 20 and rewrote this method to also include the configuration in this controller. I realize this is a bit complicated. We're going to see this again next semester. I don't know if you've used dependency injection when you've been working with Vue.js, but we certainly will when we work with Angular and Node. We use similar techniques. We pass one object to another object. So now I'm going to come all the way back down to the bottom. We have this kind of empty payment method. All it does is load a view. So we want to set up payment page to show the order total. So we've called set object to put the order into a session variable. Now we want to call get object to get the order back out. And we also need to cast it. We need to say what kind of object this is. So we're going to read our session variable, convert it back into an order, and store it as a variable. So I'm going to create actually three session variables. Sorry, three variables in the view bag. So we want to display on the screen how much the user has to pay. When we pass the amount to pay of the charge to Stripe, they don't want us to pass in a decimal value with dollars and cents. They want the amount in cents. So if the total of the cart is $29.99, they want us to pass them a value of $2,999. We have to multiply by 100 to get the value in cents. The last thing we're going to do is we're now going to use the whole reason we needed that configuration is we need to also include the publishable key. We need to read it out of the settings and include it in a hidden field in our form. So this is where we use our configuration. Oops. Configuration. So we want to read from the Stripe section the value called publishable key. So we want to pass all three of these values to the view. That's actually, okay, bit of a confusing question. We're always going to pass it. It's going to be part of the form, but we're going to hard code it as Canadian dollars. It will always be Canadian dollars. So the currency conversion is actually handled by the user's credit card. So if you have a credit card, if you have an American dollar credit card and that's what you pay with, the charge is in Canadian dollars and your bank will do the conversion and do it at a rate favorable to them. So you're going to lose a few points on the conversion. We don't have to do it. Okay, so I think that's everything we need. So we're going to get the total from our session variable. We're going to display the total on the screen. We're going to convert the total to cents and also grab the public key. And then we're going to add a little JavaScript to our payment page that will invoke Stripe. So I'm going to go back to payment. So first, we can show in currency format our view bag total. And we'll put this in a little H2 tag and we'll format it as currency. So the very first thing they'll see is this is how much I owe. And we're going to use JavaScript to handle the rest of the interface. So we're going to use the JavaScript from Stripe. We've got to pass it a few things. We want to pass it the total that we've calculated in cents and passed in the view bag. So again, if the order was $29.99, this field will have a value of $2,999. This is going to pop open a little window for us, so we want to hang on there. So that'll just be the title for the little payment window that Stripe opens up. I think there's also a don't worry about that image for now, actually. We'll leave that in. We'll set the currency right here as lowercase CAD, so that's the Stripe code for Canadian dollars. And the last thing we need is our key. So again, we can read this from the view bag. That's a publishable key. So we're going to display the total in dollars and cents. We're going to call Stripe's JavaScript to build our payment form. We're going to pass it the amount, the currency, the name of our shop, and our key. So I should be able to go back to my cart now, click checkout, fill out the checkout page with the name and contact info, and click next, and we'll see what this gives us. It's not going to process the payment, but this is going to be, should generate the UI, should generate the front end with a little pop-up form that comes from Stripe. And it's customizable. We can add an image. We can add other things. I'm just going to try it. We'll see if it works properly. So I'll go back to my cart. My cart should persist. I'm logged in both browsers now. Not sure I really need to be in Chrome anymore. Okay, so here's my very expensive cart. I'm going to try to check out. So I'll fill out my checkout page. I should probably change my button to say next. The scaffold gave us a button that says create. Maybe I'll change the text on that in a minute, and I don't need this back to list. So let's see what we get. Okay, so the view bag shows our order total, and now we get a button generated from the JavaScript. If we view the page source, it's got my amount in cents, the name of our store, and here is our publishable key. So when I click pay with card, tells me in test mode, it copies the name of our store there. So that's our line 14, the data dash name. That's what shows up in the top of the window. There's also a data dash image. If you want to include your logo in the pop-up, you can. So I put in an email address. Now, the card number, the valid card number is 424242 with any expiry and any CVV. If I use any other card, notice as soon as I start typing the 4s, the JavaScript knows it's a Visa. I try to pay with this. Right? It already knows that expiry is no good. So the card is in test mode, but we didn't use. And there's a link here. Hey, if you want to test different scenarios, go to stripe.com/doc/testing. So if we want to simulate, for example, let's go there. This will outline for us different card scenarios we can use for testing. And their site's painfully slow. So if you want a card to be accepted without prompting for authentication, we can just, that's a valid card number in their test API. If you want it with authentication, there's a card number. So here they describe, if you want to test, for example, a MasterCard that works, you got to start it with a 5 debit card. So you can test all of these scenarios depending on what cards your store is going to use. So if I put in now notice it refreshes our page. So our payment was accepted successfully on the front end. It just reloads because we haven't written a post. It wants to now post our form. We've only done a get method that displays the form. We haven't written any kind of handler for what happens after Stripe validates. So I don't think the card's been charged yet. If we go here and I go back to my yeah, it's authorized but not charged, right? So it still doesn't show me. So there's no charge yet. This was here when I loaded it. So if you go back to your dashboard, it's still going to show 0 at this point. So it's only doing an authorization at this point. We still haven't taken their money, so we don't want to save the order yet. So what we now need is a post method, and I guess we should also put in here the authorized annotation. You can't go to the payment page if you're not logged in. So I'm going to set up now the post method. We'll set it up, we'll flesh it out after we take a break. And the post method is going to take 2 parameters that we get back from Stripe. The first one, they're both strings. Let me just make sure the name. Stripe calls them something particular. So we have a Stripe email. So these values come back from Stripe after they authorize the card. And we need 3 annotations above. We've got to require authentication with authorize. we're specifying that this version uses HTTP post. So this is after Stripe has authorized them, we now want to submit their data to the server, and then we're going to actually have to write a bunch of code to send the actually generated payment and use our Stripe.net package. So we've got authorized, and because it's a form, of course, we want to validate anti-forgery. So when our payment is all done, assuming we can successfully send a payment, what should happen at the end of all of this? The users click that little Pay Now button. They filled out the Stripe form with an email, a proper credit card, and they've clicked Pay, and Stripe authorized and said, yep, this is good. We're going to write a bunch of code, so code will go here. Send payment. Stripe. Once that's all done, what should happen?
Return a user confirmation.
Okay. Yeah, so we can actually scaffold out a receipt page, and we'll redirect the user off to that page that shows them the details of their order. They definitely want to get an order number. We could. I don't think we set it up to do it, but we could. It's a good idea. So that'll be the last thing. And what'll have to happen in between? So first we send the payment to Stripe. We make sure Stripe is cool with the payment. Before we can load the receipt, we're going to have to do something else. Yeah, we're going to have to generate and save a new order. You're going to create an order in the orders table with the customer and the date and the total and all the information they gave us on the checkout page. First name, last name, address, contact info. We then need to save the order details. Right? We need to add each item that was in their cart. We want to save to the order details. And then we'll need to do one more thing before they get their receipt. Yeah, we're then going to, so if I have 3 items in my cart, once I'm done paying, I make a new order. I want to copy the 3 items from the cart table to order details, and then I want my cart should be empty. So in fact, we're going to transfer the items out of the cart table into the order details table, and then we'll delete them from the cart table. Once that's all done, we'll show them the receipt. So we'll just write one line of code in here for a minute, and then I need a coffee. Those guys need to step out. We'll see who gets back first. So we're not going to return a view. We're going to do a redirect. We don't want to load a view, another view called payment. We're going to redirect to an action. We haven't done this before. Instead of redirecting to an action inside this controller, we're going to scaffold a new orders controller and redirect there. So the URL will be localhost/orders/details 2000, whatever our new order is. So we're going to use this version. Our action name will be details. Our controller name will be orders. And we'll have to amend this after because we also have to append on the ID, the new order number. We'll take them straight to that page that the user can see their order. So that page will have a dual purpose. It'll be a confirmation or a receipt that we get right away as soon as we pay, but it will also be part of the order history in the customer area. So anytime I can come back, log in, I can see a list of all my orders, I can click the details, and I can see that receipt or confirmation anytime in the future, because we might need it. Maybe I don't get my order, or maybe my order ships and it doesn't have all the correct items. So I need to be able to go back to that page and look it up so I can call the computer store and say, hey, where's my printer? Where's my laptop? So at least now this will build. I'll again push up to GitHub. And we will take a break. We should be able to finish this with the time we've got left.